Welcome to the Monsters Among Us podcast. This is episode 8, El Chupacabras. You, our listeners, have a real fascination with scary monster tales. And when it comes to modern myths that send a chill down your spine, El Chupacabras absolutely delivers. Today, we're plunging into some of the most unsettling encounters linked to this creature, trying to understand why this legend continues to terrify.
Absolutely. El Chupacabras has really clawed its way into our nightmares, hasn't it? And so many of you have shared your own questions on what you found so creepy about this story. So we're focusing on those truly chilling accounts, the ones that make you double-check the locks at night.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start where a lot of this unease began. Puerto Rico in 1975, in a town called Mocha. Even though it wasn't yet known as the Chupacabras, something truly strange and, well, frightening was unfolding. Can you set the scene for us? What actually happened in those initial attacks?
Right, so what's so striking about the Mocha incidents is just how sudden and bizarre they were. Picture this. February 25th, 1975. Residents of Mocha are disturbed by this really eerie silence, followed by a chilling shriek. Some described it as almost, unearthly.
Okay.
And the next morning brought this gruesome discovery. 15 cows, 3 goats, 2 geese, and a pig, all dead. And the key thing, completely drained of blood, exsanguinated. Every drop was gone.
Wow, 15 cows, that's a lot.
It is, and the local newspapers, they quickly latched onto this, naming the mysterious killer El Vampiro de Mocha, the Mocha vampire. So right away, you see this interpretation through a frightening, familiar lens.
A vampire in Puerto Rico? I mean, it's a story that grabs you instantly, doesn't it? And this wasn't just a one-off thing.
No, not at all. Over the next couple of months, this terrifying pattern just repeated itself. More and more animals were found dead. Same telltale signs. Blood drainage. And this really ignited local fears. Theories started flying around wild animals, maybe something stranger, extraterrestrial even, some suggested early on.
It sounds like the authorities tried to get a handle on this pretty quick. I remember reading about a swift investigation happening.
They did, and what's interesting when you look back is this clear emphasis on kind of keeping the more alarming aspects quiet.
Yeah.
Aiming for successful media suppression.
Right, trying to prevent panic.
Exactly. The goal was to find an explanation, any explanation, quickly.
And what did they actually learn about how these animals were being killed? What made these deaths so particularly disturbing?
Well, the examination of, I think it was 28 animal carcasses confirmed the cause of death, a complete blood loss. And the really consistent finding was this pair of small puncture wounds, usually on the neck, often with some tearing, like surface lacerations around them.
Just 2 small holes.
Mostly, yeah. These precise, almost surgical punctures are what really fueled that initial vampire fear.
It's a detail that's hard to shake off. Were there any other deaths around that time, maybe not involving animals, that sort of added to the overall sense of dread?
Yes, and here's where it gets truly unsettling. There's a mention in some accounts of these animal deaths being similar to other unspecified deaths. There's even a reference to a Dr. Foster's death. We don't have specifics, but it suggests this pattern wasn't entirely new, even if the scale of animal deaths was unprecedented.
Huh. Makes you wonder what else might have been going on that wasn't really being talked about.
Exactly. It adds another layer of unease.
So the early explanations people threw out, like snakes or bats, they just didn't fit the bill, right? Especially considering the size of the victims.
Right. I mean, when you're talking about cows and pigs being drained of blood, the idea of a snake doing that is just, physically impossible. And the lack of crushing injuries ruled out big constrictors.
And bats.
Bats, yeah. Vampire bats feed on blood. But they couldn't possibly drain that much from such large animals. Plus, the wound patterns didn't match up.
Okay, so that leaves something else. Now, there's this scientific explanation proposed involving something called the canine hematophagic virus, or CHV. Can you break that down?
Yeah, this comes from one analysis, specifically a video called Thought Potato, which proposes a biological explanation for the Mocha vampire. The theory is that the creature responsible wasn't supernatural, but actually a canine, like a dog, infected with this specific virus, CHV.
A virus that makes dogs act like vampires.
Essentially, yes. The proposal describes CHV as a single-stranded RNA virus, possibly zoonotic, meaning it could jump between species. It's in the Monoernega virales family. Apparently, this virus can affect almost every type of cell except red blood cells, using ACE2 receptors similar to some other viruses we know to get inside cells.
Okay.
Then through a complex process involving its own enzyme, an RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, or RDRP, it replicates. And crucially, due to a theorized mutation, this virus supposedly developed an integrase-like activity.
Integrase, like an HIV, allowing it to insert its genetic material.
Exactly. The idea is that CHV reverse transcribes its RNA into DNA and then integrates this into the host dog's genome. It might even incorporate some of the host's own genes during this process, and when these altered genes are expressed, it leads to profound physiological changes in the dog.
Wow. Okay, so what are these changes? How does this infection progress according to this theory?
It outlines distinct stages. First, days 0 to 3. The virus multiplies rapidly. Symptoms are mild or absent, but the dog's metabolism starts increasing.
So subtle changes at first.
Right. Then around day 3, things get worse. Fever, lethargy, loss of appetite, and interestingly, a dramatically decreased heart rate, potentially leading to a comatose state for a bit.
That's counterintuitive, a lower heart rate.
It is. Then the immune system kicks in, causing systemic inflammation. This leads to fur loss and also hyperkeratosis, basically, thick, scaly skin, supposedly due to upregulation of keratinocyte growth factor.
Giving it that sort of sickly, perhaps monstrous appearance people later described.
Potentially, yeah. Then, days 4 to 7, the dog becomes more alert again, but also ravenously hungry. And neurological symptoms appear: confusion, aggression.
Okay, this is starting to sound more dangerous.
Definitely. By the end of the first week, the virus has genetically altered enough host cells that the first physical transformations begin.
Transformations? Like what?
Within about 21 days, stage 1 is complete. This involves dorsal bone growths, osteophytes, like bony spurs along the back, supposedly due to manipulation of BMP signaling. Also, rapid elongation of the eye, teeth into fangs, driven by a melloblast activity, and bulging eyes that lose pigmentation, possibly from collagen overproduction and tyrosinase downregulation.
Spikes, fangs, pale, bulging eyes. That's quite a picture.
It is. And apparently the mortality rate during this stage is very high for the infected canine.
And if it survives?
If it survives, it enters stage 2. This involves a major restructuring of the digestive system to primarily process blood. The intestinal tract shortens. The kidneys become highly efficient at excreting nitrogen waste from a high-protein diet. The gut microbiome shifts entirely, focusing on energy and carb metabolism from blood and developing protective bacteria.
So it becomes biologically adapted to drink blood.
That's the hypothesis. And there are changes in the mouth, too. The palatine bones in the roof of the mouth become more flexible. The buccal cavity, the cheek space expands. Maxillary bones get denser. All this allows for a powerful suction force, like a buccal pump mechanism.
To actually suck the blood out.
Precisely. The feeding process described is nocturnal. The infected canine develops saliva containing an anticoagulant called draculin, interestingly, and nerve-numbing proteins.
So the victim doesn't feel much and the blood flows freely.
Exactly. It makes those precise twin pricks, which apparently get refined in later stages, and then uses that suction mechanism.
And the physical changes continue.
Yes. Altered jaw joint cartilage, increased mandible density, those dorsal spikes keep growing, and its muscle fibers shift to become almost entirely fast twitch, making it incredibly fast, but also prone to fatigue.
Speed bursts, but not much endurance.
Right. Then there's stage 3, which this theory suggests has been observed in infected coyotes, specifically in Colorado later on. This involves limited bipedalism.
Walking on 2 legs.
Sort of. Lengthening and reorientation of hind limbs, hypertrophy meaning growth of the femur, tibia, fibula, pelvic girdle changes. Muscles like the glutes adapt for a more upright posture, though quadrupedal movement is still preferred for distance.
So it can stand or maybe take a few steps upright, but mostly runs on 4 legs.
That's the idea. Stage 3 also includes enhanced forelimb dexterity changes in the wrist and hand bones, finger elongation, muscle adaptations for more precise movements, plus expansion of the motor and sensory cortex in the brain, effects on the basal ganglia, suggesting more complex motor control.
That's incredibly detailed. Where would such a complex virus even come from?
Well, the hypothesis gets even stranger here. It suggests this specific CHV strain might have actually originated in humans.
Humans?
Yeah, potentially carrying over adaptations like bipedalism and dexterity via horizontal gene transfer when the virus somehow jumped from humans to canines.
That's a wild theory, a human virus jumping to dogs and turning them into these creatures.
It's definitely out there, but it attempts to provide a single, albeit complex, biological route for the initial MoCA events, linking them to later different-looking Chupacabra reports like those mangy canids.
Okay, so that's one attempt at a scientific explanation for the 75 MoCA vampire. But let's jump forward now, a couple of decades to the mid-1990s. This is when the name El Chupacabras really explodes into the public consciousness in Puerto Rico. How did these new reports differ? What made them maybe even more frightening?
Right, if the Mocha incidents were eerie and localized, the 1995 reports really kicking off in Canovanas unleashed a whole new level of terror. This wasn't just isolated incidents, it was suddenly a wave of reports. Dozens of farm animals found dead, blood sucked dry through those small perforations again.
Same method, but more widespread.
Much more widespread, it seemed, and the immediate reaction was just widespread panic. Livestock owners were terrified of losing everything. It felt like a direct assault on their livelihoods.
And this is when those truly bizarre physical descriptions started circulating, right? The image we often think of today.
Exactly. The Puerto Rican Chupacabras of the mid-90s became this absolute nightmare creature in the popular imagination. People described it as anywhere from 3 to 5 feet tall, often with bat-like wings.
Wings, that's new.
Very new compared to Mocha. Also sharp fangs, a hunched back, and these large, piercing black or red eyes that sometimes seemed to glow. Some reported scales or sharp quills, sometimes tiny little arms, and this incredible jumping ability.
Jumping a mill.
Yeah, leaping great distances. Later accounts even added details, like spikes running down its back and a long, thin tongue. It was like a monster cobbled together from our deepest fears.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. And the community response in Canovanas must have been, well, chaos and fear?
Chaos is right. People were genuinely deeply afraid. They started setting up watch groups, trying to protect their animals. Parents were scared to let their kids walk to school alone. Some families, apparently completely overwhelmed by the fear, even abandoned their homes.
Wow.
You can just imagine the level of dread gripping that community.
And the stories didn't stay confined to Canovanas, did they? The fear spread pretty rapidly across the whole island.
Like wildfire.
Oh.
As local news and then national news picked up on these terrifying reports, the sightings and claimed attacks just multiplied. Within about a year, by April 1996, some estimates were claiming over 2,000 animals had fallen victim to this thing. It was full-blown panic.
2,000. That's staggering. When something that strange and frightening happens, people naturally look for explanations, even far-fetched ones. What were some of the main theories playing around then?
Well, given Puerto Rico's history and the significant presence of the U.S. military there.
Right, lots of bases.
Exactly. So one theory that really gained traction was that the Chupacabras was some kind of escaped military experiment. The idea of a genetically engineered creature getting loose from a nearby base, like Fort Buchanan, it played on existing anxieties and suspicions about what might be happening behind those closed doors.
That makes sense as a rumor, given the context. And didn't the local authorities get involved in some pretty unusual ways?
Oh, absolutely. You had the mayor of Canovanas, Jose Ramon Camo Soto. He organized this very public safari to hunt the Chupacabras.
A safari? Seriously?
Seriously. It involved like 200 people, armed police officers. They even had a caged goat as bait.
Oh, my God.
And the mayor himself was carrying a crucifix. The media, of course, had a field day with it, dubbing him Chimo Jones.
Capu Jones, okay.
It sounds almost comical now, but it really shows the level of desperation and fear people were feeling. They wanted action.
Yeah, I can see that. But the Puerto Rican government itself also had to step in more formally, right? Recognizing the wider impact.
Exactly. They were worried about public safety, obviously, but also the economic impact on farmers and the potential damage to the island's tourism industry. Who wants to vacation where a monster is killing livestock?
Good point.
So they brought in scientists, biologists, zoologists to try and find a more, rational explanation for what was going on.
And what did these experts conclude? Did they offer any theories that calmed things down?
They offered a range of more, let's say, down-to-earth explanations. Some suggested that a severe drought at the time might have driven bats to unusual feeding behaviors, maybe attacking larger animals out of desperation.
Okay, that's plausible, maybe.
Others pointed to packs of feral dogs, which can definitely kill livestock, though the blood-draining aspect is harder to explain. Or maybe escaped rhesus monkeys from research facilities.
Monkeys.
Yeah, apparently there were some around. One theory even proposed a sudden spike in the mongoose population could be responsible for some of the smaller animal attacks.
So lots of potential natural culprits, but nothing that perfectly fit all the reports, especially the weird descriptions and the blood draining.
Pretty much. It seems like there were attempts to find logical explanations, but the terrifying image of the winged, red-eyed chupacabras had already taken such a firm root in people's minds.
And you mentioned the cultural context earlier. How did that play into it?
Well, it's fascinating. Looking at this through a wider lens, these kinds of legends often tap into deeper cultural anxieties. For some in Puerto Rico, living this complex relationship with the U.S. as a commonwealth, feeling maybe like outsiders, the chupacabras became almost this monstrous symbol of that otherness, of something strange and uncontrollable imposed from the outside, perhaps.
So the fear wasn't just about a literal creature. It touched on broader feelings of identity, power, maybe even resistance.
It seems possible, yeah. And as you mentioned, this terrifying figure quickly jumped from news reports into, well, everything.
Became a pop culture icon almost.
Almost overnight. By the end of 1995, the chupacabras was everywhere. T-shirts with its menacing image were selling like crazy. Musicians were writing songs about it. You could even order a chupacabras cocktail in some bars. It had become this full-fledged cultural phenomenon, a truly modern monster etched into the collective imagination.
Okay, so we have the 75 mocha vampire, possibly explained by that CHV virus theory, and then the 95 winged folkloric chupacabras of Puerto Rico. But then, around the early 2000s, a different kind of chupacabra started being reported, right? In places like Mexico and the southwestern U.S. How did these descriptions differ? Were they as frightening?
Yeah, this is where the chupacabra story takes another distinct turn. The reports coming out of Mexico and the U.S. Southwest described a very different-looking animal. Typically, these were hairless, extremely gaunt, maybe sickly-looking creatures walking on all four legs. Think like a weird-looking coyote or dog.
So much more animalistic. No wings, no spikes.
Generally, no. It was a far cry from the almost reptilian or alien creature described in Puerto Rico. Still unsettling to look at for sure, but in a different way. More pathetic, maybe, than terrifying.
And unlike a lot of the sightings in Puerto Rico, these reports often came with actual physical evidence, didn't they? People were finding dead animals that looked like this.
Yes, exactly. And when these carcasses were found and actually examined by biologists or veterinarians, they almost always turned out to be known animals.
Like what?
Coyotes, dogs, sometimes raccoons, usually suffering from really severe cases of sarcoptic mange.
Mange. Skin disease.
Yeah, it's caused by mites burrowing into the skin. It causes intense itching, inflammation, and significant hair loss. In advanced stages, the skin can become very thick, wrinkled, and leathery. Secondary infections are common, and the animal becomes emaciated. It can drastically change their appearance.
So they look like monsters, but they're actually just really sick animals.
Pretty much. Sometimes genetic abnormalities might also contribute to the strange appearance, but mange was the most common explanation for these canine chupacabras.
So in many of these cases, the terrifying mystery had a more unfortunate, though still unpleasant, scientific explanation.
Precisely. And because these chupacabras were identifiable, ultimately, as known animals, albeit diseased ones, they never quite capture the cultural imagination or the same level of fear as the original Puerto Rican legend.
Right, less mysterious, maybe.
But it's really important to remember, though, that for the farmers and pet owners who found these creatures or lost animals to something, the problem was very real. The loss of their animals was serious, regardless of whether they thought it was a mangy coyote or a mythical beast.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. The impact was real, whatever the cause.
Exactly. And it really highlights how our fear of the unknown can sometimes lead us to interpret natural, albeit disturbing, events like a diseased predator through the lens of pre-existing monster stories.
It really shows how these modern legends aren't just spooky tales. They reflect our deep-seated fears, our need to explain the unexplainable, and how different cultural contexts shape those explanations.
Definitely. The Chupacabra story is a perfect storm of mystery, biology, folklore, and cultural anxiety.
Okay, let's shift focus again back to Puerto Rico, but to a specific, very mysterious location, El Yunque National Forest. There are some particularly chilling accounts centered there, aren't there, even predating the 95 wave?
Oh, absolutely. El Yunque is this incredibly dense, mountainous rainforest. Beautiful, but also has this aura of mystery. And yes, some very strange encounters have been reported there. One account, detailed in a Grapevine Documentaries video, dates back to 1973. Some boys were camping deep in the forest.
73, so even before the Mocha incident.
Right. They reported seeing this shadow figure moving incredibly fast through the trees. They described it as something between human and animal.
What did it look like?
Their description was unsettlingly specific. Fit, muscular build, really long arms that hung past its knees, hoof-like feet, and a tail.
Hoof-like feet and a tail. That's different again.
Very different. And the story gets worse. They said the creature rushed towards them, and one of the boys was apparently flattened or knocked down forcefully.
Wow. What makes that even more disturbing is that Puerto Rico doesn't really have any large native predators, right? No bears, no big cats.
Exactly. There's nothing in the known fauna of El Yunque that remotely matches that description or aggression. It makes the encounter deeply unsettling.
And there's a suggestion these stories might go back even further, linked to the indigenous Taino people.
Yes, some researchers point to ancient Taino rock carvings found within El Yunque. These petroglyphs depict some unusual beings. There's speculation these could be early representations of similar strange creatures, possibly linked to their sky deity, Yokahu. It hints at a much older mystery in the forest.
Fascinating. And more recently, paranormal investigators have looked into El Yunque specifically regarding chupacabras, haven't they?
Yes. Investigator Nick Redfern, for instance, reportedly spent a decade investigating these phenomena. He interviewed numerous people, veterinarians, police officers, ranchers. His conclusion, based on these accounts, was that there seemed to be a genuine phenomenon occurring, something beyond just misidentification or folklore.
Did he document specific encounters?
He did. One involves a man named Hector Ducino, who apparently had 2 encounters. The second happened as he was driving away from the forest. He describes seeing 3 creatures crossing the road. They had dog-like faces but triangular heads, shiny orange eyes, and hands that looked like crab claws.
Crab claws, orange eyes. It's incredibly specific and bizarre.
It gets weirder. Ducino reported experiencing memory loss immediately after the sighting. He apparently woke up later at a baseball field about 12 miles away, with no memory of how he got there.
Missing time, that adds a whole other layer. Are there other reports of similar creatures in El Yunque?
Yes. Redfern and others have collected accounts of creatures matching that general description. Triangular heads, glowing eyes, unusual limbs being seen within the forest boundaries.
And what about attacks on animals within El Yunque or nearby?
There's a particularly chilling account from 1999. On a farm bordering the forest, the farmer heard noises, a pig squealing violently. He went out and saw this dark silhouette carrying one of his pigs away into the darkness.
Carrying a pig?
Yeah. The next day, he found dozens of his pigs mutilated. Not just drained of blood, but organs were removed, too. And again, that characteristic clean, round hole near the front leg, with almost no blood spilled around the carcass, despite the internal damage.
Organs removed too. That's not typical predator behavior at all. Did the farmer see the creature clearly?
He apparently got a closer look later. He described something with kangaroo-like legs, skinny upper body, small arms with claws, those piercing red eyes, and emitting a horrible smell.
Kangaroo legs, skinny arms, red eyes. It's like every sighting adds another strange detail.
And then there's the machete story. The farmer supposedly confronted one, swung his machete at it, and it just bounced off, like hitting metal. The machete actually broke in half, reportedly making a metallic sound on impact.
Bounced off, broke his machete. What on earth could withstand that?
Exactly. And the story takes another turn. Shortly after this incident, the farmer was allegedly visited by men in black.
Seriously? MIB.
That's the claim.
Yeah.
2 men, dressed in black suits despite the heat, acting very intimidatingly. They reportedly questioned him about the incident and took the broken machete away, saying they needed to test the metal fragments.
Taking the evidence, that sounds like classic MIB lore. Are there other reports linking MIB to chupacabras?
Apparently, yes. Redfern and others have documented several instances where witnesses reporting chupacabra sightings, especially ones with unusual details or physical evidence, claim to have been visited by these intimidating, official-seeming figures in black. The theory, of course, is that they could be connected to secretive elements within the U.S. government, maybe Air Force intelligence, DOD, black projects trying to suppress information.
So the suggestion is that someone in authority knows something about these creatures and wants to keep it quiet.
That's the implication. Redfern even recounts a meeting in 2005 with a civil defense agent in Puerto Rico. This agent supposedly showed him official files containing numerous eyewitness reports, paintings, and drawings, not just of chupacabras, but other strange entities sighted in and around El Yunque. It suggests some level of official awareness or at least documentation.
Official files. Wow. And then there's the whole UFO connection, right? Especially around El Yunque.
Yes, that's a persistent theme. Many chupacabra sightings, particularly in the El Yunque region, have occurred in areas also known for high levels of UFO activity. Strange lights, unidentified craft.
And the U.S. military presence comes back into play here.
It does. The U.S. military occupies a significant amount of land in Puerto Rico, nearly 13% at one point. And there's a long history, or at least strong rumors, of military interest in UFO phenomena.
Mm.
Some even point to the controversial closure of parts of El Yunque National Forest after a hurricane, suggesting the real reason might have been related to UFO activity, not just storm damage, though that's speculation.
It all fuels the idea that something secret is going on there. Could the UFOs and Chupacabras be linked?
Several theories propose a link. One idea is that the UFOs aren't extraterrestrial, but actually experimental U.S. military aircraft being tested out of sight.
Advanced tech being mistaken for alien craft.
Possibly. And then there's the darker theory. Genetic experimentation. Could the Chupacabras itself be the result of secret experiments conducted at nearby military facilities, perhaps within El Yunque itself, creating some kind of biological weapon or hybrid creature?
A genetically engineered monster let loose, accidentally or otherwise.
That's the terrifying thought. Some eyewitness accounts describe creatures that seem almost like engineered hybrids. Authorities might dismiss it all as folklore to maintain secrecy.
Like some kind of super soldier experiment gone wrong.
That's one of the more extreme theories, yes. And why El Yunque? Well, it's U.S. territory, it's remote, it's dense jungle offering cover. It fits the profile for clandestine activities.
It's a chilling thought. Could the government be encouraging the other explanations, like the extraterrestrial one, as disinformation?
That's another layer to the conspiracy theory. Knowing the local propensity to believe in the supernatural or extraterrestrial, perhaps pushing those narratives helps distract from a more terrestrial, maybe military origin. It's a complex web of possibilities.
So we have these incredibly contrasting accounts. On one hand, a potential scientific explanation involving a virus mutating canines. On the other, this folkloric winged creature terrorizing Puerto Rico. And then these deeply strange El Yunque encounters, possibly linked to military experiments, UFOs, men in black. It's a lot.
It really is. It spans everything from potential zoonotic disease to high-level government conspiracy and maybe even something truly unknown.
You, our listeners, have journeyed with us through some truly scary stories and, frankly, some mind-bending possibilities surrounding El Chupacabras.
Absolutely. It's a legend that keeps evolving and keeps chilling us.
So considering everything, the scientific angles, the starkly different eyewitness accounts, the layers of mystery around places like El Yunque, what do you find the most unsettling aspect of the whole Chupacabras phenomenon? And what might future discoveries, if any, reveal about the monsters potentially lurking just outside our understanding?
That's the question to ponder, isn't it? What's really out there?
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us as we took a closer look at the chilling, complex legend of El Chupacabras.